30 Desperate escape. No, you don't mind me, you keep your distance behind me and help me with the enemy's wingman, the colonel said. Song Ning realized that the colonel was not going to fight recklessly. His intention was to use the advantage of the data link to pinch up and down. Roughly speaking, the colonel's No-01 took advantage of the climbing speed to seize the height and then made the main attack, while his own No-02 aircraft remain out of range of enemy weapons as long as the mission is tracking, while distracting enemy formations. On the surface, it can be considered that Colonel Sammy did not intend to risk himself out of good intentions. Of course, it can also be considered that the old man made up his mind to take it all on his own. Song Ning did not deal with the colonel for a long time, but he knew that Sammy was in a few days. In his 10-year military career, he has served in several squadrons, and the record of his wingman is always 0. However, this was nothing to Song Ning. Due to discipline, he wished he could watch from a distance. The only thing he was worried about now was that the plane No-01 had an accident. 02 Understand. Don't be too reckless. After Song Ning responded, he immediately reduced his speed. He knew that the key to this tactic was to maintain a distance of 7 to 8 kilometers from the leader. He kills an enemy, but that's probably not what Sammy wants. Song Ning had already fully estimated the situation, and he found that the colonel had a good chance. After all, the enemy was guilty and would most likely choose to flee in a panic. This was indeed an opportunity, but if the colonel wanted to be brave, he had better have the ability. Mathanga's HUD has seen Sammy climbing fast. It's a small fast-moving blip. His radar has lost a few times in a row because the opponent is climbing fast and is still using it electronic interference. Tiger number 2, this is a veteran. You stay at low altitude and search due east. I'm worried that the enemy is not one. Understood. When the Phantom Wingman's radar was turned on, Song Ning was turning one after another, so on the Phantom's radar it disappeared in a flash. Captain, 20 kilometers away, there is another enemy plane that is escaping. It looks like an F-16. Tiger 2, he is not escaping, he must be preparing to launch a medium-range bomb. Mathanga said, he knew this tactics. When the opponent's leader occupied a high enough altitude to attack, the wingman carrying the medium-range bombs will definitely turn around, and the only way is to quickly destroy the opponent's leader. At this time, Colonel Sammy had already climbed to 5,000 meters. He pressed the nose of the plane and used the scanning method to search the front again. He found that the height of the enemy plane was already a little bit worse than his own. As he expected, the thrust of the opponent's fighter plane was limited. Unable to seize a favorable altitude, but unexpectedly, the enemy's formation was not chaotic. Even if it penetrated hundreds of kilometers into Pakistan, it did not scramble around. The counterattack was quite organized, especially the wingman can't be found now. The radar of No-01J10 automatically entered the state of tracking and scanning, and the distance was only about 10 kilometers. Soon the two planes would meet head-on. The sign of the intercepted target just appeared, and the colonel rushed to launch a missile before the enemy. He has never believed in infrared missiles, and the omnidirectional attack hit rate. He can hit it, but as long as the enemy can dive and evade, his goal has been achieved. He believes that in such a situation, he can easily occupy a favorable position. 02 Where are you? The colonel asked over the radio. He was eager to know Song Ning's location, but he found that the communication was interrupted. It seemed that the Phantom 2000H's electromagnetic interference system was self-contained and could block the entire frequency band at close range. Communication. The battle was full of drama before and after, and on Pakistani soil, the Mirage's counterattack turned out to be quite organized, and Sammy was not familiar with this new fighter, and just set the communication on a simple VHF channel. But now he has fallen into isolation, but he thought that once Song Ning turned his head, he should naturally know what to do. On the HUD, the enemy plane didn't turn around and ran, maybe the Phantom hadn't seen the colonel's missile yet, or maybe the pilot of the lead plane was quite calm, and Sammy saw that he was 1 kilometer away from the fire of his missile. Suddenly another blip appeared. Apparently, the opponent had also fired a missile at him. As a last resort, at a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour, Sammy quickly pulled up the nose of the aircraft. He saw that the G value on the HUD reached 8.5 in an instant, and the aircraft inevitably lost its target again. When he turned down the slope, he saw himself the zigzag trail left by the missile seems to have had a large overload maneuver, but there is no trace of an explosion, and the opponent's missile does not know where it flew. "Colonel, you didn't hit, the enemy plane is below you." Thank goodness, the communication finally resumed, and Song Ning's voice appeared. Sammy looked down at the vertical display, and the data link was restored. The radar data of the 02 fighter had been reflected on it. It could be seen that an enemy plane was turning at his own 2 o'clock, at an altitude of about 3,500 meters, and the distance was still there. 8 kilometers away, looking at a loss, another enemy plane is flying towards Songning. If the Chinese pilot has been so hesitant to think about the military court, he will soon face a one-on-one air battle. The colonel crossed the fuselage and looked in the general direction, but still could not see the trace of the enemy. Based on his experience, if he could not see at this distance, it was probably because he was hiding in the clouds, and there was indeed a large area at 2 o'clock. Cumulus. 02, shoot down the Phantom wingman immediately. Sammy said. He still had one missile left, so he didn't dare to expect a 3-0 match. He hoped that Song Ning would be more decisive. And now what he has to do is to secretly keep up with the Phantom captain below, which has lost its target, and come behind his ass. It seems not difficult to do so. Due to the advantages of the data link, its own battlefield information seems to be twice as much as that of the opponent. The colonel quietly switched off the radar and switched to IRST tracking mode, knowing that it was not very safe to use this infrared system in cloudy airspace, but his nature made him particularly fascinated by sneak attacks. 8 kilometers away, Matanga had just evaded a missile attack with a 9G dive turn before missing the target again. What he was worried about did not happen. Another suspected F-16 aircraft 20 kilometers away had never fired. Maybe that aircraft was just in charge of surveillance, maybe he didn't have medium-range bombs at all, he thought to himself. Matangia Weiban wanted to look up to search for the enemy leader above, but the fuel level warning appeared on the multifunction display, and the fuel consumption was over half. This is because he lost two 1,700-liter fuel tanks and at least 1,000 liters of fuel left in the panic. Inevitable consequence. Now he has no intention to climb up the clouds and continue to find the old fritters. The only thing he can do now is to quickly escape from this area and get close to the border. Let other Veziana's MiG-21 rush over to cover themselves. Fortunately, after climbing to 4,000 meters, the communication with the headquarters has been smooth. The Tiger called the Tiger's Den. The current location is 80 kilometers east of Sagda, heading 090. It is passing through Punjab. It needs fighter cover. Wandering around the edge of the battlefield, he never opened fire, and he had many opportunities, but he knew the discipline that was on him. But the situation has been changing, and as the battlefield gradually moved eastward, now he is more and more worried about another thing, which is falling into Pakistan's ground fire. On the RWS, there were radar scans of his plane from time to time, and he knew that the closer he was to the east, the closer he was to the front, and the Pakistani identification system could not identify this plane.